This is a data privacy detective. We're going to talk about identity orchestration and what this has to do with the multi-cloud data environment that we live in. Well, we have a great guest today, Eric Olden. Eric is the CEO of Strata.io, IO standing for Identity Orchestration. And Eric is the author of Identity Orchestration for Dummies. So let's settle back and be dummies and listen to this short video. And if you're interested, tune in to our much more in-depth audio episode 183 of the Data Privacy Detective. Well, Eric, thank you for joining us. And let me ask you this to get us going. What is identity orchestration?
Identity orchestration is a new way to think about identity when you move to multi-cloud. And instead of having one place to manage your identity, you've got 2, 3, or 5 different places. And orchestration allows you to tie them together so that they work in concert instead of as silos.
So your business strategy works for organizations. And what do you do for organizations?
Yeah, we're a software company, and we really do 3 things. We help companies modernize their applications to use cloud-based identity without rewriting the app. We help them roll out multi-factor authentication to meet compliance, and then we keep the applications and identity up and running with identity continuity and resilience.
Downtime is a disaster for companies, right? Very costly. What, $1 million a minute it could be?
Yeah, we've seen it, $1 million a minute. We've seen all sorts of other kind of unexpected areas like, health and human services need to be up and running to, run hospitals. So it's more than dollars, but dollars and availability really matter.
Affects real people. And in the multi-cloud environment, I mean, we log onto our bank, let's say, but we're not just dealing with our bank, we're dealing with different data providers, processors that the bank is using. And that's really what you're talking about. The data, our data is flying around to different places we may not even know about.
Yeah, especially with multi-cloud, you're going to have personally identifiable data that's linked to an identity. And now identities live in 3, 5, 6 different places. So it's very scattered, but it's a new problem. It's what you say, it's flying all over the place right now.
Well, with that, what are the big challenges that organizations face in what amounts to identity and access management, or IAM for short?
IAM in general is all the security stuff related to users, whether it's authentication or access control. Those are the kind of things that modern identity and access management encompasses. And at the end of the day, end users, we experience it as logging into my bank or signing up for a new health plan and things like that. So when you're dealing with really sensitive information, that's typically an identity management operation.
All right, well, what are the real risks here in this multi-cloud environment?
Well, risk in multi-cloud is similar to risks with a single cloud or even no cloud at all, but it's made more complicated by the fact that it happens in different places. And those are the typical things like, is the data encrypted while it's sitting in a database and while it's moving between the browser and the website? Very common. And we also want to think about the data residency issues, where multinational organizations have identity data for customers and consumers from all over the world. And that creates even more complex regulations and compliance requirements. So data security, think about how to protect the data, whether it's at rest or in motion, and where it is in rest matters as well.
Well, and then, how can organizations really ensure identity continuity, no downtime, and resilience?
Well, you think about applications and the dependency that they have on identity. It's how you basically unlock the door to the application.
Yeah.
Well, if the system that unlocks the door goes down, then the door stays shut, meaning your application is offline. So the important thing to do is to make sure that that identity system, if it does go down, that you have a failover plan and that you can keep things up and running while your primary identity system works to come back online. You want your users still accessing the application. So that's really the way to think about identity continuity. And the time to do it is before you have an outage. versus trying to respond to it after the fact. As the saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth many pounds of cure. And that
Right.
applies in identity continuity as
So
well.
build redundancy into that'd be a great. That's probably the best insurance against ransomware, isn't it? Yeah.
That's right.
Exactly. Well, the cost can be astronomical for downtime and data breaches and so on. What about the cost to us as individuals? Is our data privacy is at risk in this multi-cloud environment?
Well, I think very often people underestimate that it's going to happen to them, right? And you think about breaches, a headline, oh, that happens to other people, and I'm not getting hacked, and my bank didn't get hacked. But very often what you'll see is successive compromise, where someone will hack one system, and because human nature is to kind of be lazy and reuse things, they'll get the password out of, like, maybe you're buying a ticket to a concert. Maybe not something you think about as, hey, that's got to be high security. But if someone were to breach the ticket operations and they get your password, they can take that password and use it at your bank, where you really would be concerned. So I think the key here is to know that it's not always obvious where the compromise is going to be used, and to, wherever possible, avoid using passwords. And if you got to use a password, use a password manager. But it'd be best to just stop using passwords and insist that you're able to use multi-factor, your face scan, your finger scan, those kind of things to really protect your data.
Well, that leads my last question for you today. And what are your top tips for individuals about protecting our privacy in what you've described, this multi-cloud environment we live in, our data lives in?
I think whenever you can, avoid creating a new password for another system. And whether that means opting for the multi-factor option for authentication, or using something like sign in with Google. And Facebook offers it. There's some other identity providers, but just avoid putting more passwords out there. Those are ticking time bombs. The second thing is, if you have no alternative to a password, use a password manager to avoid reusing things. And then the last thing is, be mindful of the kind of data that you share on social media, because that is often being used, especially with AI, to scrape all the social media and to do really bad things at scale. And often people don't realize that they're giving ammunition to the hackers inadvertently by a social media post.
Great advice. Well, Eric, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And as always, listeners, protecting your personal data begins with you. Now, for more in-depth about identity orchestration, you can check into our audio version of episode 183. Take care.